and you have a sponsor like that. I mean, like, you're taking, like, that's how everything in ours is worded, so we're really assuming liability because it's our name, right? Or how is that? I mean, that just brought a question for me, sorry. I mean, it's like how it's worded too.
Yeah, I mean, when you give people the impression that it's your event, that's dangerous because now you're a target. You're gonna get named in a lawsuit.
Yeah.
So, again, it's, as long as you understand what the relationship is and you protect the county to the greatest extent possible, that's what you're after.
My thought is, and tell me what you think, is in that case, the waiver would be, you're signing this waiver, understanding that your baby's gonna come participate in this HCA event that's being held in our facility. Because you wanna use our facility, or you wanna let your child, do a crawling race against other toddlers. Since you're gonna be on our property, our grounds, you need to sign this waiver. And somewhere in the waiver, we're acknowledging that the event is actually being run and conducted by this other entity.
Okay.
That's how I think we could, Jody made a comment to me, is I'd rather have a waiver in place and have to deal with making it clear and specific enough, rather than not having anything in place.
Just assume someone else.
Yeah.
So I wonder, like, as a county, like, everything at our fair is under the Joe County Fair. We don't have any outside, even the Derby and everything, but we have a youth stampede, a rodeo, PRCA rodeo, that just uses our facility. Has nothing to do really with the county. I mean, I don't know, I guess we help them a little sometimes in different things, it's been for years, but, I mean, would we need a waiver from the rodeo? Like, I mean, have you heard about that from our county before?
Oh, sure, and there where we're talking about other events, the thing that you want to do there is, again, you still have some exposure because they have the youth stampede, it's on your property, but they're renting from you your bleachers, right? That's
Yeah.
part of the facility.
Yes.
What if your maintenance people didn't get all the nuts and bolts properly tightened on the bleachers and they collapse? Is that the youth stampedes?
It's
Should
really us.
they have to pay for, if they're willing to indemnify and defend the county for any and all claims, including those that arise out of your negligence, okay. I don't think you're gonna get them to do that. I don't think it's fair to ask them to do that,
Yeah,
quite
I
frankly.
just don't know how that all, and then,
So-
like, the county's somewhat involved, so we've been told the less involved kind of the better, but then we had that championship derby that wanted to come to town that I'm sure you heard about too. And anyway, so
Yeah.
we need more contracts in Jeff County.
So I think, as Neil said, again, rather have the waiver, so when you have the youth stampede, the youth stampede people are probably getting waivers at the front gate when they sell a ticket to people, that they're not gonna sue them if they get injured during the youth stampede. Excuse me. But if ultimately they get injured because of something that has to do with your facility and not the operation of the youth stampede, it might not be a bad idea that you had a waiver too.
And you know how it is nowadays, they'll sue any party they can that they think has any association with the injury. Then they'll kind of figure all that out as the lawsuit goes, so.
Right. So you could either try and do a separate waiver, or again, depending on how comfortable your county attorney is with it, would be to require the youth stampede to include you in the hold harmless and indemnification waiver of the participants and the people that, we know you're gonna ask people to waive their right against you, also include us in that, if you want, as part of our agreement.
So I have a question about that liability fund. You said anybody who comes to participate in any way should sign that. Oh, where do you draw the line? Of course, not in Buxton, but what about Pioneer? What about clients like this?
Again, you need to just discuss those things with your county attorney, make sure that they are aware of the different types of events that you're having people participate in, have you created a higher risk to that person than they would otherwise be? And again, you've got the immunity statute, the recreation immunity, so I don't think you need, if it's a everyday type of recreational event, you don't necessarily need a waiver when you've already got an immunity. So you don't need to do it to death.
Well, would not the posting of some of the wordage cover some of that too? You know,
Well, yeah, again, as they sign up that I want to be part of the pie eating contest, you don't need to have each individual sign a release form that then goes on file and has to be kept forever. But the sign-in sheet, if you guys agree, and what I see regularly is the sign-in sheet has the waiver in bold print on the sign-in sheet. So when they've signed, now every single person has signed the waiver that's on the sign-in sheet.
But don't you mean like the posters? Yeah.
If you do it that way, then you just have to recognize that that's the risk that you take, is if they get injured doing something like that, and you don't have a specific immunity, you know, we'll defend you, we'll pay the claim. Again, I don't want to take away from the fair by over-waivering it to that.
Thank you. Thank you.
But where it's reasonable for you to reduce the county's risk, that's what we're trying to do here. So yeah, definitely, they're gonna be part of the demolition derby. Yeah, we're gonna waiver the heck out of those guys. So now we get to vendor. This is the food booth information packet that Washington County gives to their food vendors. And you can see here again, one of the things I liked here that I see is missed sometimes is that they require that the food vendor get their permit to be temporarily selling food from the health department. Is everybody doing that? Because I know I go to a lot of conferences and stuff that people are handing out food at the conference and they don't have a food handler's permit. They're not following any of the food handler's requirements. So make sure that, and again, a lot of you have concerns about, oh, I can't get that products liability insurance for a couple of our food vendors that are mom and pops that, you know, don't have a restaurant, don't do food, but they're, you know, it's just a group of guys that wants to sell burgers at the fair. When they find out what all is involved in having a food handler's permit, they're probably going away anyway. To have a certified food handler manager at the booth at all times and things of that sort. The requirements that are there by the state health department. If you make them comply with that, the problem of whether or not they have the proper insurance for being a food vendor goes away. And again, if somebody gets really ill from food that they bought at the fair, and the fair never made any requirements or reviewed whether or not people selling food had food handler permits for the day, the courts are going to look at that very favorably. The other thing that I saw in this one that I like, again, as far as protecting the property of the county, they require that when that food handler is done, they're going to have an inspection of the area that they used during the fair to make sure that there was no damage done to the county property upon their exit. So it's a good way of making sure that when somebody comes onto your property and does damage to the facility, now it's a week later before the maintenance guys find that they've done this damage, it's harder to go back and get them to cough up for the fact that they did damage to the county's property at the time of their leaving the fair would be the time to do that. So I really like that. The next agreement here we've got is the vendor information and contact sheet. Excuse me. And again, that one didn't include any of the language regarding waiver or anything of that sort. Excuse me. So again, my question is would this vendor form be used in conjunction with the earlier vendor contract, where you get the sign off on the indemnification and release? Or is this one used for one type of vendor, whereas the other one we saw was specifically for food vendors?
This one is used in
That
conjunction with the food vendor, right?
This is just like the last page of the food vendor.
Okay. So they still sign on to the contract, but they're providing this information as well, which is good. Now we move on to contractors, was one of the other, service providers was one of the other groups that we had to take care of, right? Neil provided this as an example of, and you know, I scared you this morning about the bid requirements and those sorts of things. When you get into this situation where you've got a requirement that you're gonna have to bid out for a particular service, somebody's gonna set up all the staging and lighting for all the shows throughout the fair. You're gonna hire somebody to rent their equipment and have them set that up. It's a large enough contract that you need to go out for bid. Neil provided us with this example of a bid specification for a project there in Davis County, and you can see that over 12 pages. This is a pretty short, sweet, no extra garbage bid specification. But how many other documents do you guys have to deal with that are a dozen pages long? It's a lot of extra work for you guys. So as you sort that out, do that early, and if it's not something you're going to be able to handle this year, that's fine, but recognize that those types of purchases, these bid specifications need to be pretty detailed, because they all lead up to you first selecting the right person who's ultimately going to sign a contract with a lot of terms and conditions in it. If they're not aware of all the terms and conditions that they need to sign on to at this stage, it's going to be hard to get them to agree to it when you put the contract in front of them. And you've already selected. If they know ahead of time that Neil is going to require all of this language regarding the insurance that they're going to have to buy, both in general, this is just the section generally that you have to provide insurance. Then we go into the different specialized coverages and insurances that they're going to have to provide for workers' compensation, for liability, for professional liability, for automobile liability. Again, depending on what they're doing for you, you're going to need to require all of those different types of policies from them, so that all should be included in the bid specifications at the time that you are working through who's going to get to do it. Because believe me, a vendor who doesn't think they have to buy any of this, and they're out there, especially for you guys, Joe and Jim decide they want to bid on that staging contract, because they'll come into town here, rent all the equipment at X dollars, they'll go and set it up at your county fair for Y dollars, and they get to keep the difference, Well, their bid, the price that they're going to come up with isn't going to be kosher or apples and oranges with professional companies that do that, because they don't have any of this insurance. So be careful that you're not selecting the cheapest contractor, because they aren't going to agree to all the things that you need them to agree to in your contract that you're on. But again, here we spelled out very specifically exactly what types of insurance that contractor is going to need to have, and it's going to be different again depending on what they're doing. If they're if they're setting up staging and lighting, there's gonna need to be some language in there about that they've properly engineered that they understand that there are microburst winds, that there's weather conditions, and that they need to set up the equipment to be safe, and they are warranting that as part of the agreement. If it's a food vendor, again, they not only need the general liability and workers' comp and all of that others need, they also need products liability for the fact that somebody could get sick from that food. And any vendor who's selling something to the public, particularly if it's mechanical, electrical, could injure them. Short of the rubber knives and things like that they'll sell, the hats, sunglasses, things like that, probably not a big deal. But as soon as they're selling electrical and mechanical equipment, you should probably make sure that they can show that they've got products liability too, so that if the public's injured from those products that they bought there at the fair, you don't end up with part of the claim as being the location where it was purchased from.
One of the things that our sheriff's department has requested from us to have the vendors not bring is rubber knives and guns, because when it's dark outside, they can't distinguish the difference, and they don't know whether or not it's a threat. And so far, we haven't got the commissioners to agree to that, but.
Yeah, I mean, again, it is your fair. You should be able to control it reasonably. And if the sheriff is concerned about those things, I think that's the reasonable thing for you to do. And again, along with the insurance requirements, we've got the indemnification agreement, because again, there's no reason to ask for insurance if you're not requiring them to indemnify and hold harmless the claim. That's the first step. First, you make sure that they understand if we get sued because of what you're doing on our fairgrounds, you're gonna pay our claim. Then you ask for insurance to prove that they're gonna be able to live through with that promise. It's very simply all that's all about. Seems really complicated, but that's all we're asking for. This is now an actual contract that provided as an example for services. And again, just like in the bid specifications, we spelled out all the different insurance that the contractor is going to need to provide, the different limits and things like that. And again, I'm not going to give you any silver bullet, how much insurance do we have people provide us, because it depends. What are they doing for you? How much of it are you controlling? How much of it are they controlling? How long of a period of time? All of those sorts of things. So as the event's coming up and you're trying to work out those details, share the information with the county attorney, get on the phone with me, and we'll talk about, is this a $1 million policy that we're looking for, or is this a $5 million policy that we're going to be needing to ask for? If it is for a service or that you're contracting for and you're going out to bid, we need to have that discussion again before the bid specs are back, not at the time of the contract. We've got a good hold harmless indemnification agreement here. Here's that clause that I talked about earlier, entire agreement clause, where again, it would be nice if you can find a way to have one agreement for each type of person, and make sure that you've got everything in that. But if you end up with general rules and then an application form, when you get to the actual contract or permit that they're going to sign, make sure that you're not just using one of these entire agreement clauses because most contracts have that. You don't want the entire agreement clause if there are things in their application and in your general rules that you want to apply that aren't also in this agreement. So either do the entire agreement clause, but also say this agreement and the application and general rules make up the entire agreement. But don't, again, I know a lot of you are using copies of agreements that you scabbed from one of the others in the room 2 years ago, and it's been working, so you're not gonna ask any more questions. Just, that's dangerous. You need to make sure that all of these are written for you and your situation. George?
I was just gonna add, you could incorporate the other things into the paragraph.
Somebody else's contract that works really great for them is really bad for you. Let's just put it that way, very simply. You need to have your contract for you. And just got a couple of other provider contracts. This one is for actually an attraction at the fair. Or excuse me, no, this was for a performer. And again, we've got liability and insurance, hold harmless agreements, all of that is there. And also had a separate one, and Danielle sent me over that used very similar agreement, but a little bit different when it was an attraction versus when it was a performer. And I thought that was good that they recognized the difference, that there was a little bit different relationship between the county and somebody who's coming to perform to make money, and somebody that you're asking to come and provide an attraction to draw people to the fair. Because that is two different types of relationship. But in both, again, they did a good job of saying, you know, if we get sued because of something you do, you're gonna pay our claim. If you get sued because of something we do, we'll pay your claim. I think that's reasonable and fair. Questions? Comments?
I just have one more. When you're doing the indemnification clauses across the board for all the different types of agreements, you should still make sure that that they're similar, so everyone is always indemnified, so it's always the fair board, the county, employees, volunteers, and other associates, through all of them, so that you have, so they can't argue that in one you specifically only wanted to indemnify the fair board and the other, the county employees.
That's a really good point, because plaintiff's attorneys will look for those little things, inconsistencies. Yeah, in every other one of your agreements, you said that they needed to indemnify, you specifically listed that they needed to indemnify their volunteers, and in this one you didn't, ergo, we don't have to indemnify your volunteers under this specific agreement. So, again, a little bit of time up front is gonna really, no, I'm not gonna say, okay, a lot of time up front is gonna save you a world of hurt later, because have any of you ever been deposed in a lawsuit before? Joanne has. I'm sorry.
Best day of your life, right?
It's an ugly, ugly situation. If you want the fair to just grind to an absolute halt for a year, have a lawsuit filed against you. It's a mess. It's ugly. We don't want that happening. So as much of this as we can do ahead of time, the better. And again, that's what we're here for. I haven't met a county attorney in any of the counties yet that refuses to work on this stuff. Sometimes they need a little prodding, sometimes they need more help, less help. And I just really appreciate, Neil and Jody have been really good calling me with questions. And a lot of times it's just a simple matter of talking it out as to how we're going to deal with the situation. The important thing is they need to know what you're up to. Don't hide from them what the real relationship is between you and the other party. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter that the search and rescue is going to run a day. I'd like to have it different, but if that's the way it's going to get done, that's the way it's going to get done. We all just need to recognize we're going to have a lot less protection under that. Let's make sure that the county attorney knows that and does as much protection as we can given that situation. I didn't give you two a lot of time to talk. I'm sorry. You did such a good job with just providing me the samples. But they really are truly your best support group there at the county attorney's office. So do use them, and if you're not getting the help you need from your county attorney, let me know and I'll check it out. Okay. Thanks again. Everyone have a safe trip.
Thank you. Yeah, really good.